that you got going on at the bottom there.
All right, guys, here we are. We have the pre-fight show for World Series of Fighting 29. John Franklin with the Combat Press. I'm joined by Nick Peralta. Nick, I'm going to throw it over to you real quick. Just give me an idea of what it's like in the venue right now.
The venue looks amazing. We're at the Bank of Colorado Arena here in Greeley, Colorado. I got to say, it's very lively. A lot of people already here. We're about 2 hours away from the event. And I got to say, it looks like it's going to get packed. There are a lot of people waiting outside. This should be a very exciting event, and I think that this is going to be a fun one.
You know, it's kind of weird for me because it's one of those, like, almost like a boxing event, whereas, not to disrespect any of the other fighters on the card, but everybody's really here to see the big fight. It's Gaethje, it's Foster. I mean, are you getting in the buzz that you're hearing that people are interested in the rest of the card or just the headliners?
It would seem that it is about the headlining event, and let's be real. I mean, it is one of the most enticing and phenomenal lightweight fights that you can make outside of the UFC right now. You got Brian Foster, who is a veteran, who has been around, who has looked fantastic throughout the majority of his career and is on a terrific run right now. And you got Justin Gaethje, an undefeated lightweight champ, many people like to see him get tested. And I think tonight is one of those nights where he very well may be.
I agree. So let's get it started. So right at the beginning of the TV bouts, it's going to be 3 rounds. It's going to be 170 pounds. Josh Caven and Chris Holcomb, both guys are fighting out of Colorado. It's 11-6 for Caven. It's 7-4 for Holcomb. A couple of submission guys. So I was watching the Facebook Live stuff that Joey Varner, Chael Sonnen, Ray Sefo, and Carlos Silva were doing, which, by the way, let me take my hat off to them, figuratively, obviously, in saying that they did a fantastic job on that. The guys should do it more. I'm super jealous I'm not in Colorado. You're a lucky guy to be there. But they did great. So what they said, and I'll pose this question to you, when you have a couple of submission guys, sometimes it turns into a stand-up fight, and sometimes these guys kind of get into the scrambles, as Joey Varner alluded to. What are you expecting out of this fight? Do you think these guys are going to bang, or do you think they're going to try and see who's better on the floor?
Well, you're right. Most of these guys are submission artists, but I will say, sorry, the lights just brightened up on me here. But I will say, I think that from this specific fight, when you look at the fighters that some of these guys are training with, Chris Holcomb, who trains with multiple Muay Thai guys, he's actually a jiu-jitsu instructor at his gym over at, forget the name of the gym, Trials MMA and Fitness. I believe that he will probably look to keep this one standing and really try to work his striking and see if he can find any type of advantage that way before having to rely on his bread and butter, which would be the grappling against another grappling opponent. Josh Cavan, of course, himself another grappling opponent. He's got a few knockouts though in his last few wins. So I will say we may see a striking bout, and who knows? I mean, it's really it's up in the air if it comes to that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think for me, I like to see the sort of the irony of two submission guys banging it out, because what's the point of, if I wanted to see them sit there and see who's better on the floor, I'd go to watch them in a jiu-jitsu tournament. So I think it's interesting to see those guys in that it's sort of like there's a respect paid, and it's sort of an interesting narrative when those two guys get together like that. All right, let's move on. Next up, it's Corey the One Davella, number 2 middleweight in World Series of Fighting. It's Lewis Handguns Taylor. Davella has a bunch of huge names on the that he's fought. So Rockhold, Herman, Matt Horwich, Terry Martin, Bobby Volker. Now, he hasn't done the best against these guys, but from my perspective, when I look at this fight, and I'll get your thoughts on it, sometimes when you're the number 2 ranked middleweight in the world and David Branch is fighting in April, who's the champion, he's fighting Clifford Starks, who's the number 1 middleweight in the world, sometimes there's a tendency to look past your current opponent and understand that, okay, I'm probably the next in line for Branch. What do you see in this fight, and what do you think? Are you thinking any of that's a play?
It could very well go into play. And, Corey Davella, while having may not the best success against some of these big names that he's competed against, experience counts. And in this fight, it very well may play into his favor. We also have, Lewis Taylor, who's thus far looked fantastic in his bouts. He's riding himself. I believe he has let me see, let me check this because I don't want to get this wrong. I want to be able to say this correctly. I do believe he himself has a good streak going. He does. He's got 4 wins, all by finish, knockout or submission. He's got 3 submissions, 4 knockouts, or 1 knockout, and he's looked fantastic in his latest fight. He was supposed to make his debut at World Series of Fighting 24. That bout canceled out, and here he is making his debut. Again, you got two young studs who have been in. One who's been in there with some of the best, and another guy who's looking to make a name for himself. When you got a recipe like this, you're going to have an exciting fight.
I agree, and I think, like we said, when we talk about finishes, so what I got is 3 knockouts, 8 submissions for Davila, 5 knockouts, 5 submissions for Taylor. So that lets me know that Davila's looking to do one thing. Taylor's is wide open. He's a lot like what we have in our headliner, Brian Foster. Brian Foster can beat you in a lot of different ways. It's the old analogy I used. I don't know if I was talking to you or not, but the analogy I used before was that Brian Foster has a lot of ways to get over a wall, and Justin Gaethje just runs through it with a tank. So, we'll talk about that more here in a second. But I think that's an interesting matchup too, and I think it's very interesting to see. You have a star like David Branch. There's 3 main guys in the World Series of Fighting. It's Justin Gaethje, it's David Branch, it's Marlon Moraes. So when we look at these guys in terms of who's next for each of them, that it gets really, really interesting. All right, let's move on to Josh Cuddly Bear Copeland, Mike 300 Hayes. 11-3 for Cuddly Bear, 19-10-2 for Hayes. So this looks like the guy. These are going to be the guys who are going for that heavyweight belt. This is what they're being set up to do. So, what do you see when you see this fight?
Well, they both have quality experience. Believe it or not, Josh Copeland himself has been in there with some UFC fighters. He's gone in there against Jared Roshaw, Ruslan Magomedov. That experience could count for something. He's also competed for the RFA and won, and I believe competed for the belt. I'm not sure if he won. I think he did win it though. Mike Hayes himself is a guy who's a Bellator veteran. He's been in there, guys like Neil Grove and Andres. I'm going to butcher his last name, but Kraniatakis. But again, he's been in there with Cage Warriors, Fight Night in Moscow, War MMA, which is Nick Diaz's promotion, King of the Cage. He's been everywhere, and experience counts as one of my main beliefs. But in this one, when it comes to heavyweights, anything goes. And of course, if you look at these guys, they have a lot of finishes between them. It really could end up becoming, who lands first at this point. I think this will probably not be one that hits it. If there's one fight I bet to not go to decision, probably be this one.
And I was looking at the notes for this, and let me take a look back at so the weigh-ins. So Copeland came in at 261, Mike Hayes 228. So that's small. Copeland's almost at the heavyweight limit. Mike Hayes is here at 228.
That's about the same kind of weight differential that was in the Brock Lesnar-Randy Couture fight. Now, this isn't going to be that kind of fight, but that kind of size differential, we've seen it before, and we've seen that it plays a factor.
Absolutely. And Copeland trains out of Grudge with Justin Gaethje. He's been in there with Jared Roshaw, Ruslan Magomedov. So, he's been in there with some stud guys. Let's take a look real quick. And I wanted to do this earlier, and it escaped me, but let's take a look at the odds. So they got Mike Copeland as a minus 420 favorite in this fight. So Copeland, that's a huge number, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question is, and we sort of didn't get into this earlier. Maybe we'll run back before we get into the main event. But who do you like here? Do you think Copeland? He seems to be the guy with the higher pedigree, or do you think? Hayes has had it rough in his last 8 fights. So do you think that Hayes is being brought in to make Copeland look good, or do you think he's got a chance?
Very, very well, maybe. You're right. He's had a tough run. He's only had one win in his last 8 fights, as you guys pointed out. And then you got Josh Copeland, who's got the size, who's got the experience to match, who's got the knockout power, definitely to boot. And Mike Hayes, if we look at his losses, though he is one tough mother, man. Because most of them are by decision, but he is susceptible to the knockout. We've seen it before. But the majority of his losses are by decision. He's a tough guy. He's a guy that hangs in there with some of the heaviest of hitters. Even Andre Arlovsky couldn't finish this guy. So you never know what we might see in this fight. If he can hang in there with a guy like Josh Copeland and be able to score points, he very well may get away with the victory here. Josh Copeland, like I said, he's a bigger guy. He could enforce that weight. He could pin him against the mat, against the cage. He could just use his weight to try and win this fight. If he utilizes some skill behind that, he very well see a very dominant victory on the part of Josh Copeland as well.
Absolutely. And I want to we'll go back to the other fights just for a moment, and we'll look at the numbers there. So, all right. in terms of the odds. So Caven's -200 and Chris Holcomb's +170. As far as DeVella, -125, 105. These are closer fights than I kind of thought they did. I really thought there was going to be a bigger disparity between DeVella and Taylor. So in terms of picks, who do you have for those two fights? We'll start with Caven against Chris Holcomb.
I will go with Josh Caven against Holcomb, just based on the experience that he has. He's also got a much more well-rounded game, seemingly. While we know that he's ranked highly in jiu-jitsu, he has money knockouts in his record as well. And then you look at Holcomb, when you look at guys that are able to carry more weight when it comes to mixed skill, I tend to favor those guys, especially when it comes to someone who's more experienced over Holcomb.
All right, now we'll get on to the next one again. We'll go through it is Corey DeVella and Lewis Taylor, -125 for DeVella, +105 for Taylor. I mean, this is just a bus stop on the way to David Branch. Is that correct?
Maybe. But with that middleweight division, it's really kind of open right now, and anybody's looking for a reason to throw their name in the hat right now. Clifford Starks definitely did that. Won 3 straight, won dominantly in all 3 of those fights. And now we're looking for somebody to back that up with the same kind of streak or pedigree, and who can be able to follow up against that, against either Branch or Starks, whoever wins that fight. So, you got to think that these guys are either coming in with two types of mentalities. One, either being that they're looking to get in there, get exciting, and get an exciting finish, or to really get in there and just win. Now, when it comes to these guys who are finish heavy, you got to think that maybe they're probably going to go with the first option. So when it comes to that, I'm going to go with Cody DeVella.
All right, sounds good. So yeah, let's talk about the middleweight division while we have a second. So I got the power rankings in front of me.
Wow.
David Branch, Clifford Starks, Cody DeVella, Vagabov, Ladov, and Nikolai Salchov. So like you said, that middleweight division is open. There's not a lot of guys in there that have big names. So if you're Corey DeVella, your biggest problem is that your champion has another belt to defend. So what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts, I will say, there was a reporter that told me one time that it's really smart that he's in 2 divisions. He's always going to be busy. He's always going to be looking to fight. But the second he's injured, that might come back to bite him. It's just a matter of whether he's willing to stay busy and stay in shape and continue coming in and continuing to fight. I think that maybe he is. David Branch is a guy that certainly has made it look, has granted the appearance that he may be a step above all of these guys, not just in middleweight, but at light heavyweight as well.
And I don't know if it benefits him or if it hurts him in terms of the fact that, at 205, there's some real guys that are vying for him. So I don't know if he's not thinking of 85 less, or if I don't know where his head's at as far as the 2 divisions. But 205, you got Vinny Magalhaes, Jake Hune. You got some guys there that are coming for you. 85, not as much. So I think that it's good that he defends both belts. He's staying active. Clifford Starks seems to be the fight right now, but the more intriguing matchups seem to be at 205.
Definitely. Like you said, that these divisions hold quite a lot of merit. I guess they're throwing on some amateur bouts here that I was unaware of, and here they are. They're about to start these ones off. Should be exciting. Like I said, the streamed events start around, I believe, 6 o'clock Pacific time, which is 7 o'clock our time. And but to your point, when it comes to the middleweight division, when it comes to the light heavyweight division, my only point that I can make is that they're so open, they're so ready, they're so widely available to throw somebody into the mix. There is a contender that could possibly come out of any bout, as long as they're able to look like they deserve or like they belong in there, for sure.
All right, well, let's get to the big one. It's Justin Gaethje. It's Brian Foster. It's what I've billed as the most anticipated fight in the history of the World Series of Fighting. I know some people think that's kind of a bit of an exaggeration on my part. I don't think so. I think these guys are about as evenly matched as 2 fighters are. If you factor in everything that Foster's been through, and if you factor in how motivated he is to take this belt, I think that sort of closes the gap. Whereas I think that Gaethje has the advantage on the feet. So let's talk about the odds real quick, and then we'll get into a full proper breakdown of this fight. So Gaethje's a big favorite here. He's -330 in Vegas. Brian Foster's plus 270. First off, how's that number sit with you?
It sounds about right. I mean, when you got a guy like Gaethje who's been as dominant as he's been, he's as close to the kind of Marlon Moraes as we can get. I mean, the guy has just, since he's been in the UFC, since his career has started, he has never really had to deal with too much adversity in his career. But if there's a guy that can come in and give you adversity, Brian Foster can be that guy. He's certainly capable of not only knocking you out, but taking you to the mat and bashing your head in, or finding a submission if it's available to him. And so when it comes to those odds, it really doesn't shock me as much. But I think Foster is getting enough respect to where we got to understand this is a guy that could go in there and definitely shock the champion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It sounds like it's getting a little hot in there with the amateur fights and everything.
It's getting antsy. It's because the announcer is being loud. It'll quiet down.
So, yeah, I agree. So I've done a lot of research on these guys. I spent a lot of time sort of breaking them down. For me, it comes down to Foster's complete game versus Gaethje's power. So what we have to understand is, and I'm going to pose this question to you: do you think that Brian Foster is willing to take this fight to the mat? And if he does, or if he wants to, if that's the game plan, can he get Justin Gaethje there?
He has to be willing to take this fight everywhere. He has to be. I mean, we know that Justin Gaethje is a guy that's willing to bite down on the mouthpiece, come at you, and pressure you until you don't want to feel that pressure anymore, until you're not willing to be in there with him any longer. And a guy like Brian Foster, he does not deter away from that type of pressure easy. In fact, he's a guy that wants to amp it up if you try to do the same with him. So again, I mean, we're really witnessing two guys that are really going to be tough to try and outpace one or the other, and that in itself makes it for a very exciting fight. But when it comes to that kind of pressure that Gaethje is going to be bringing, Foster does want to keep in mind that he has to be able to, calm him down, make him the one that pressures him. Not only that, but also composes the fight to wherever he wants it to be. And if he changes levels, if he utilizes his wrestling, if he utilizes his jiu-jitsu, if he utilizes everything in this fight, he's very capable of doing that and winning this fight.
And honestly, that's what it boils down to, right? I mean, if you're Brian Foster, it's weird. The game plan's so different. It's like you have to maximize every single thing that you have at your disposal. I mean, it's kind of like fighting Justin Gaethje is kind of like fighting Dan Henderson. It's like you have to bring everything that you have to the table while still avoiding a huge right hand. So you spend the entire time, trying to find your spots and trying to make things happen for yourself. But that right hand sort of sitting there looking to just, get the boom dropped on you, and it's like Gaethje's got that kind of power too. So I think I would be interested in a ground fight. I don't know if we'll see it. Now, another thing that's interesting to note about Brian Foster is he's fought 33 professional fights and only been the distance once. I ask this question with sort of a wink in my eye and even a smile in the words that I'm saying. But does this fight go the distance?
When it comes to 5-round fights and it comes to Justin Gaethje and Brian Foster, I mean, those three mixes, I mean, first of all, these guys might pace themselves, but they very well might not. I mean, Brian Foster is a guy that absolutely will try and look for the finish. If he senses even a slip of blood, he will go for it. And Justin Gaethje is near nigh the same way. He's the guy that if he can put the pressure on you and he lands something and he thinks that that's it, he's going to come at you. And the last thing you need is a guy going berserk on you, especially one like Justin Gaethje, who is able to put so many crits and technical combinations together in the while basically in a brawl. He's technically a brawler. He's a technical brawler, and like Matt Brown famously has put it. And when it comes to that kind of pressure, is Brian Foster going to be able to handle it? I think he's one of the very few in the world that can. That's what makes this fight so amazing.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of things that make this fight amazing. Like you said earlier, you led with it. It's probably one of the best 155-pound fights you could put on outside of the UFC.
Very well, yes.
I find this fight really interesting because of Gaethje's. The interesting thing about Gaethje for me, and I talked to Trevor Whitman about this, is he sets traps, and yet it doesn't seem like he sets traps. He's kind of like, again, I've compared Justin Gaethje to Arturo Gatti 1,000 times. And I think that I'll do it again here because Arturo Gatti was famous for getting into these, like taking you into his world. And that's where Arturo Gatti succeeded. You want to get into different people put it different ways. I say dogfight. I think people think I'm alluding to Two Dogs Fighting. I was in the military, so I'm actually alluding to jet fighters. But Justin Gaethje goes that way. He'll pull you into this fight, and you think that he's just okay. I'm going to go into this fight because the kid leaves his chin out there. Meanwhile, I think he's a lot more technical than he gets credit for, and he gets more technical in each fight. I talked to him about the difference between who he was when he fought Nick Newell, when he fought Luis Palomino the first time, when he fought Melvin Guillard. When I saw him fight Melvin Guillard, he was throwing punches like he was in a snowball fight with 1,000 third graders. I've never seen anybody just rear back and close their eyes and gun like that. It wasn't the guy that fought Luis Palomino. It wasn't the guy that fought Luis Palomino in either fight. So as clean as Brian Foster is, and Justin took umbrage when I said that Foster may have cleaner strikes. He said, I'm going to show myself to be the more technical striker. All right, so we have a third man with us. I'm going to go ahead and bring him in now. We'll get his thoughts on things. He works with the World Series of Fighting. He works with the Combat Press. Kyle Symes. Kyle, what are your thoughts on Gaethje versus Foster?
I think it's just going to be really interesting if you're having two guys that are both going to come forward and not want to give ground at all. So it'll be kind of interesting to see who breaks first.
I agree. I think that that is the thing that they say that most people can't handle when it comes to Justin Gaethje. It's an issue of his pressure. Can you match his pressure? We know that Brian Foster can match his intensity, but can he match his pressure? So, Kyle, my question, I'll pose the same one I did to you that I did to Nick. Any chance this fight goes to the ground?
I actually think it might. I honestly think Foster may go for a takedown. I was just reading an article where he was talking about how Justin plays with fire a little bit too much as far as willing to take damage, take one punch or take two punches to give one of his. So, I mean, I could see him going for a takedown. He kind of seems like he wants to be a little bit smarter than to go in there and go punch for punch. But, I mean, at the same time, I got to think he's also looking for a knockout as well.
Yeah, I agree completely with you. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how this fight really plays out. These guys are both high-level guys, and I really don't know. I'm super stoked about this fight. Talk to me a little bit from your perspective, just on because you and I cover World Series of Fighting as much as anybody else. So, just what are your thoughts just on the fight altogether in terms of your emotions? How much have you anticipated this fight?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of the most exciting fights that you can put on outside of, the UFC or Bellator, not to mention just one of the most exciting fights in lightweight division. I mean, you have two guys that no matter who they're fighting, it's going to be an exciting fight. I don't think I've ever seen Justin Gaethje or Brian Foster in a boring fight, at least from their perspective. So, I mean, it's going to be one of those fights that it could be over in 30 seconds. It could be, a 30-minute war or 25-minute war. So, I mean, it could go either way, but either way it's going to be exciting, which is, at the end result, that's what everybody wants as a fan.
Absolutely. So I'm going to put you on the spot. I need a pick. Who do you got?
Honestly, if I have to pick between the two, I mean, it's kind of hard to pick against Gaethje just because he's been so good for so long. I'm a really big fan of how he's able to adapt moving forward, kind of feeling the fight out on the fly. I really liked especially that combination he did against Palomino where he had him against the fence and was working him in a clinch and then threw a couple leg kicks off of Muay Thai palm. I thought that showed a lot of fight IQ as far as being able to adjust mid-range. But, I mean, you really can't count out Foster. The guy's super tough. I mean, losing in the first round and then coming back and beating not only the guy that made him lose the first time, but winning the two other fights. I mean, so it could go either way, but I'm just going to go with Gaethje just because it's a safer pick.
I appreciate that. I appreciate a man picking safely in a fight with two guys who don't fight safely. So, all right, guys, that's Kyle Symes. He's going to be all over this fight and all over the World Series of Fighting. He and I got some things in the works coming forward for World Series of Fighting fans, so keep your eye out for that. Nick, I'm going to throw it to you. Again, last thing to ask, really, who's your pick, Gaethje or Foster?
This is such a tough fight, and I am a fan of both guys' styles, basically both guys in general. They are amazing fighters. One thing about Brian Foster that he was actually they didn't come to me until we were talking about it. But one of the things that he said pre-fight going into this fight is that he thinks that Gaethje flirts a little too much with brain damage. That's a quote that he gave to MMAfighting.com. And with that quote, it suggests that he, and I read the article, and it goes towards what he was saying. It suggests that he believes that Gaethje is very one-dimensional, and it also tells me that he does plan on taking this fight in numerous other places in the cage, on the mat, against the cage, in the clinch, wherever he can get it. I think he's going to really mix it up in this fight. And as I said, I think that is one of the strategies that is key to beating Justin Gaethje in this fight. And Brian Foster has proven he's a very, very great mixed martial artist. And I think with that style, I think Brian Foster is going to come in here and win the championship tonight.
I hate to pick against Gaethje. I have great relationships with him. I got great relationships with everybody in the fight, so that's neither here nor there. But my point is that I just feel like the Brian Foster narrative, and listen, we all write for sites. We all like compelling stories. We all like interesting things. The Brian Foster narrative, he told me earlier in the week he thinks that he's going to throw Justin Gaethje this ass whooping, and he's going to be a better fighter for it. I don't know that I don't know if he's going to throw him an ass whooping. I know that if he wins, Justin Gaethje will be a better fighter for it. So that interests me, and I think that with respect to some of the other stuff that that moves the World Series of Fighting forward, I'm a fan of when Nate Diaz beats Conor McGregor, because now you have another star in Nate Diaz. I'm a fan of when Miesha Tate beats Holly Holm, because now you have the three queens. Like we used to have the four kings in boxing: Duran, Leonard, Hearns, and Hagler. I like that, and I like that if Brian, and listen, this is a loaded 55-pound division for the World Series of Fighting. Don't get me wrong. It's not like if Justin Gaethje wins, he doesn't have more guys to fight. There's Jason High, there's Ozzy Dagulagov, there's Mike Ricci, there's guys on this roster. So that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point that I'm trying to make is that I think that Brian Foster, and I hate to use the word deserve because it takes away the other guy he's fighting, but Brian Foster has lived his entire life between the loss of his brother and some of the issues that he had with getting cleared to fight, and the UFC and commissions and all this other stuff. This night is set up to be Brian Foster's night, and you kind of got to hope that occasionally here and there a guy can have that night. And you can be a part of it, and you can write about it and give it its proper perspective, and that's the hope as a media member. With all of that being said, I'll say the exact same thing that I said when I previewed the fight. I think that Brian Foster has a lot of paths to victory. Are as great as Justin Gaethje's right hand. So while I'm picking Brian Foster, I'm picking it with the understanding that Justin Gaethje, and I'll quote Joey Varner here for once. I'll quote him one time, and from now on, and after that, I'm going to steal it. So the first time you get quoted, and moving forward, it's just mine. I've taken it for my own. I've stolen it. So Joey Varner said Justin Gaethje has sleep in his hands, and I like that. So it's absolutely correct. Justin Gaethje has the kind of power that puts guys out, and Foster has a little bit of that. Foster has a stick of dynamite, and Gaethje has a truck of dynamite. So that's what this fight's going to come down to. If Justin Gaethje can put that right hand on Foster, and there are openings, it could be a very short night for Foster. But I'm picking him. I think that Brian Foster is a smart enough guy to keep himself out of harm's way, and that'll be that. All right, I'm going to get one final word from the guys, and then we'll go ahead and end this thing. I'll start with Kyle. Give me just a final word and close things out.
Yeah, I know everyone's going to be tuning in for the Gaethje-Foster fight, but make sure you don't sleep on the rest of the card. There are a lot of guys on this card who are going to be involved in some high-profile fights coming up. The heavyweight co-main event, one of those guys could very easily make it into a heavyweight tournament that Ray had talked about putting together either early this year or later in the year, so definitely don't sleep on that fight. But, of course, always make sure you got your calendar slot, of course, cleared out for the Gaethje-Foster fight, because that's where the real money's at.
Perfect. All right, Nick, let's have it. Finish strong, my man. Let me give you the final word.
I'm all about this main event. I cannot stress enough that this will be one of the best title fights. This has the potential to be one of the best lightweight fights we see this year, and it certainly has the potential to be one of the most exciting title fights we see this year as well. I think that World Series of Fighting certainly banked us a good one tonight. And again, like I said, we will probably end up seeing a very great all-around card. As we said, most of the guys on this main card are finishers, and most of these guys on the main card are looking to prove a statement. This will be a fun World Series of Fighting card. You've got to tune into this one.
Absolutely, fans. It is on NBC Sports Network. It is 10 in the East, 7 in the West. It is getting started. That's the main card. The prelims will obviously be before that on WorldSeriesOfFighting.com. I'll be checking them out all night. I'll be doing recaps, and depending on how everybody's night works out logistically, we may be able to bring you a post-fight show. So we'll see if, God willing, they don't kick Nick out as soon as the fights are over. Maybe we can get a post-fight show. We'll see what Kyle's up to, and we'll recap it all, because I have a feeling it's going to be a pretty good card to recap. So for Nick Peralta, Kyle Symes, this is John Franklin signing out with the World Series of Fighting pre-fight show.